Hello folks. So if this is for my experimental sound games class at Micah, and so today we're going to be talking about granular synthesis in pure data. So we've been doing some stuff with pure data in the class already, so I'm going to assume that you more or less know what pure data is. Quick run through in case you're new or watching from some other place. Pure data is a graphical programming system that lets you build software generally focused on audio stuff, and we've been using it in the class for a couple different projects. What is granular synthesis? So I've kind of picked this as a topic mainly to provide a bit of an overview for what it looks like to make a relatively complex pure data patch. So that's a patch that is relatively flexible, but can make some really interesting big sounds and a quite wide range of sounds. Granular synthesis definitely can do that, and you're also playing with audio files, which is quite a nice way of doing sound design. There's a weird myth about pure data that I've run into before where some people think it can't use audio files. Well, that's completely wildly untrue, and it's actually an extremely good tool for playing with audio files. So this is a good example of that. So granular synthesis, here's a little illustration, is basically the idea that you take a sound file, and by splitting it up into teeny tiny little chunks, or by playing back teeny tiny little chunks at a time, and then reconfiguring and reconstituting those tiny little chunks, you can have a wide variety of control over the sound. So this allows you to do things like everybody has heard in software like Ableton Live, which lets you change the pitch while changing the while not changing the timing, or vice versa, so changing the timing without changing the pitch. That's a really big deal because, as we talked about in experimental sound games previously, sound is really linked with time. When you listen to a sound normally, you're really stuck with the timing that it was recorded at. That's an amazing thing. It's a magical thing. It's a super magical thing because it means you can, when you listen to Neil Armstrong talking on the moon, well, it's kind of like as if you were listening back to him in real time, or even like you were on the moon with him at the time, because you have to spend the same amount of time talking and listening as he was talking, right? So the amount of time is fixed, and you have to input the amount of time that it took originally to make that sound. And there's a kind of a wonderful relationship we have with time, and therefore with memory and sound. Granular synthesis really breaks that in a wonderful way. It gives you a ton of power, but it is relatively complex to set up. So if you imagine that, like in this image, you can, at any given point, take a dozen little snippets out of a sound, chuck them all together and play them together, then that's kind of what granular synthesis is doing. Each one of those snippets is called a grain, and what that image doesn't show you is that the grain is what's called windowed, so that means it fades in and it fades out very quickly. And then those fades overlap with the next grain. So that means you can get this kind of theoretically seamless stream of grains, and they can be all from a single point. So that means you can freeze a sound as it's playing and just listen to just that one moment, and it just loops this little tiny snippet of sound over and over and over. And that's a very powerful thing because you're all of a sudden kind of pausing a moment, and all these little grains are fading and cross-fading in amongst each other, or you can listen to the whole sound at the same speed or at different speeds. So we're gonna go through all of that, and we're gonna do it through the medium of pure data. So pure data is this is a pure data patch that I've made that takes a sound file. So there's a bunch of stuff here, but we're going to go through it piece by piece. So I've selected a sound file. You can use these little buttons up here to select a number of different sound files, and these are the sound files that were created by my experimental sound games class. So that was for another assignment. The first square is empty, so that's for live sampling if you want to do that, and I'll show that later. And these other squares are each a different sound. You can also click the little thing to pick your own sound if you like. Now I should say that I've put in the comments, and I think this will show up in the video info, a link to GitHub that gives you this whole patch, so you can download and play along. Now, if you go down to the bottom here, there's a little box that says, a little object that says ys.granular stereo. So that's where really all the action happens. So I'm going to click that, open it up, and you see a bunch more stuff. And really, each grain, if you imagine, like in that picture originally, each grain is a little object in here, and that's called clone y grain stereo. So that's a stereo grain, and there are 32 of them. So this number here is, it can be anything. You can have as many as your computer processor can allow, but that means that there are 32 separate grains. Now, the more grains you have, the more dense of a kind of granular system you can make, which is nice. But it can work perfectly well with fewer grains than that. Now, if we click on here, we'll open up an instance of a grain. So this is the playback system for one grain of sound. And theoretically, if I've done everything correct, a little quiet, let's find another spot. Let's go there, and yeah, let's try that again. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So you can just about hear a single grain there. Let's find another one. Why is that not working? Oh, there we go. All right, so I'm clicking the wrong thing. Okay, so this little sample offset thing that I'm moving here is choosing where in the sound file I'm playing the grain from. So you can kind of line it up, and you can imagine I'm playing the sound from right there or so. And when I click this play one grain, it's playing a grain in here. I can recreate that here. Now, this bang is passed through to here. This is the reverse system, so we'll get into that later. But essentially what you're doing is, when I click this bang, it creates a line, which is like an envelope. So that means it sends a stream of numbers from 0 to 1. And that goes into a windowing system. So that's bringing my volume up and then down again using a crown. So this is my volume at the beginning and the end of my envelope, my grain. That's eventually plays back through the volume. Now, but otherwise, that grain goes through a control for the pitch right here. Then next it goes through the size, so how big of a grain or how small of a grain it is. And then that gets played on my sound file. That's what tab read 4 is doing. And the location of where it's getting played is coming from over here, and that's where my sample offset is coming from. So all of that comes through. It gets kind of, for the beginning and end of it, it gets faded in and out. There's a panning system over here, an overall volume, and then the output comes here. So all that is to say, I can play one grain there. Now, if you can listen to it backwards as well. But let's just listen to it forwards for now. Okay, so that's playing a single grain. Now, what most people end up doing with granular synthesis is playing lots and lots and lots of the grains at once. Now, I'm just using the simplest system imaginable for that, and that's just using a metro to send out a stream a stream of lots of bangs. As those bangs come through, then they will play, each one will play a single grain from the next instance of my granular playback system. Now if I turn it on, switch it on over here, it will play a number of bangs in a row, and you'll hear them. So that's very slow. That's going, it's the speed is set by my, what I call the grain density. Grain density is right now at 866, which means every 866 milliseconds, 0.8 seconds, it's triggering another grain. So I'm going to pop that over there so you can see it while I change the grain density. Here it start to get faster and faster, and you'll hear them start to overlap very soon. So you now can't really hear the individual grains anymore. You're hearing this stream of grains being played back at every 41 milliseconds now, and the size of my grain is 8,100 samples. What's that? 8,100 divided by 44,100, which is my sample rate, is 0.18 seconds, so every 18 milliseconds. So each grain is 18 milliseconds and they're being played back every 41 milliseconds. Is that right? Might have gotten that math wrong, but anyway, it's a small grain and there's 32 of them being played back in a row. Now, all 32 of these are identical, so we get this kind of like robot sound, but that's still pretty fun. So I'm going to move where I am, and I'm going to click my autoplay on, and what autoplay is going to do is play this sample back at the rate that it would have been recorded at originally, but it's going to play it using 32 grains played at that density, and you'll hear what it sounds like.
Oh no, 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 oh no. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no,
so
oh no, oh no.
Almost sounds like an actual just sound recording, right? Like that's not that far off what the original sound sounds like. It's got a little bit of a kind of ring-oddy sort of sound to it because of all this sort of like phase cancellation that's going on and stuff. And there's probably stuff you could do to make that go away. But I'm happy with it that way, so I've left it that way. Now, that's a granular playback system, a very complicated way of playing back a sound at normal speed, which is not really what it's for. What it's for is for fun effects like this. So this freeze button does what I was talking about before, where it stops the sound and it plays all 32 of those grains overlapping at that exact same moment, and it gives this impression of like stopping the sound, freezing the sound, holding it right there, which is an amazing thing. You can't really do that in other playback methods. Now, all of this has no randomization whatsoever. It's just like playing all of the sounds at once. Now, that can be kind of fun. Let's pick a spot and play with a little bit. So some of the parameters we can change that don't add any randomness are the size of the grain. So that makes everything that is taking now a much longer, each grain is much longer. If I turn it off, you can hear how much longer it is. No, oh no, right. Versus something very short. Okay, so let's get that longer again. And the grain density, the relationship between size and density is quite close, because it means you can have them overlapping still overlapping, but with less dense playback. So there's kind of an interesting balance to strike there. But it does create, there's parameters to play with. Let's make it nice and big. And let's make the density small again. And you'll hear when I turn autoplay back on. It's a very different characteristic altogether. Now, other things you can play with as well is the grain chance of how much chance there is that each grain will play, and that's being controlled over here with this in my master kind of sound playback, grain playback system. If I bring down the chance, then I'll start doing these kind of like slightly randomized, well, fairly randomized rhythmic structures, right? And you can actually kind of like turn this into sort of a drum machine by bringing the density up. The grain plays sort of halfway. So you got to kind of, if this was a more percussive sound, this could be a sort of stochastic rhythm generator, I guess. Especially if this was shorter. There we go. Now, the thing that really makes granular stuff start to feel good is light randomness. Now, that's what offset random, random pitch, well, let's start with offset random. So what offset random will do is every time the grain is played, instead of just playing it at the exact sample offset location, it will move it slightly. It will move it either slightly forward or slightly back, and it means that instead of just like a robot playing 32 instances of the same sound over and over, it means it'll kind of like flicker around and back and forth about like around a little area. So let's listen to it in practice. Get our size up a little more and our intensity. Now I'm going to hold down shift and bring up offset random so that it happens really slowly and you'll start hearing the difference. Starts to get more texture. Now this means when I move the sample offset, it'll start feeling really much more like an instrument. Now you'll notice that there's actually some kind of there is some delay when I move something across, and especially when I move it back. Like it takes a few seconds. Now that's because it's running through a bunch of the grains that still need to be played back. So there's that's a bit of a downside for the way I coded this. There's probably a smarter way to code it that I haven't done. But in any case, offset random gives you this nice kind of like texture at low levels. It gives you this much better kind of texture for playing a single sound in a single place. If you bring it up, if you bring it much further, you start getting really nice effects. So at its maximum, it's taking sounds from the entire sound file. So this means every single grain that plays back is being pulled from a different spot in the sound file. I've made a little visualizer for this here. So this shows every time the grain is being played back, where it's being played from. If I put this in the middle, you'll see that as I bring the randomization down, you'll see all of those locations collapse into one. There we go, getting closer and closer and closer and closer until they were exactly aligned, and then back out. This visualizer only shows the first 10 or so of the grains. There are 22 more, but it gets kind of pointless to have so many. As I move the sample offset, you can see them all moving. And like I say, the randomization is taking the sample offset as the center, and then kind of you're dancing around that sample offset at the distance set by offset random. Now I'll show you where that's actually happening. that's happening over here. Sample offset comes in. Then for every time there's a bang, that generates a random number. So that's every time this sound, this grain gets played, it generates a random number. That's offset. That creates this. That's multiplied by this to give it a smaller or a wider range. So you can watch this here get bigger the more I bring this offset up. And then the final location of the sound, the number represents samples, again, so it's quite big numbers, is here. When this is all the way down to 0, that number doesn't change at all. But as I bring this up, the range of differences in those numbers will change. It's all done relative to the length of the sound file. So if you change the sound file, then that range will necessarily change. Similarly, another way you can put texture into something is with reversing. So you can either reverse every single grain. So now every grain is being played backwards. Or you can set it to be random. So when it's randomized here, there's a 50% chance every time the grain is played that will be either played forward or backwards. Now, there's a really great thing you can do as well. Which is have control over the pitch. That gets really fun. So I'm going to hold down Shift again and click on this grain pitch. I'm going to do it a bit faster actually. So if I bring that offset all the way down to 0 again, and here you actually get really quite smooth pitch control. And that's because each individual grain is being repitched, right? So it's not, you're not repitching the whole sound file, you're repitching each individual grain, and then they are being overlaid on each other. So that means you can keep playing all the grains at exactly the same speed, but you can change each individual pitch at the same rate. Or if I reset the pitch, and I turn off autoplay. Let's just get a stream of grains playing. Now, similar to the offset random, which I have set very lightly here, you can have the same thing going with pitch. Now each grain is being played at some different pitch relative to the pitch that you set here. So if I bring it all up and make my grain size nice and big. So that pitch randomness is happening here. And it works in exactly the same way as the location randomness. So the location comes in, or the pitch, the master pitch that you've set comes in here. It's modified by a ratio of how much randomness you want, and that amount of randomness then adds into it. Now the difference here is that the range of that is actually up for some debate. I'm still playing around with it. So as right now I've set it to go from 0 to 4, but actually if you make it go higher, it's pretty fun. So up for some debate. I've got a little reset button here if you want to play it back at normal pitch. And similar to what I was mentioning before, it takes a little while for all the bangs to be reset. So now we're finally reset. Let's play back around with it. So now just to sort of demo several of these, or a bunch of these random triggering systems all together, let's set the sample offset in the middle somewhere, bring up my offset random, bring up the random pitch, bring down the grain size, bring this a little bit in the middle, bring this sort of like that, and what we should get is a sort of like bunkers pitched let's keep the density up actually. Now one last thing that adds a really nice kind of like sheen to the whole thing is to bring up the random panning. So if you're listening on headphones or on speakers, you'll hear it now bouncing around you, which makes it sound even better. Now, as I mentioned before, it's really not anything harder to add your own sounds into this, to record directly into it. There's a recording system over here. So I'm going to record in mono because I've just got one microphone. Got 10 seconds here. Seems quite excessive. Let's bring that down. 4 seconds. I'll record some whistling. Oh, I think I've got my, yeah, hold on. Let's do that again. You can hear a few clicks there. I think they might be where I started and stopped that recording right here. You can test that by bringing down the offset random. Yeah, there we go. Quite a nice sound. sounding engine outside. You can see there's quite a nice range of different sounds you can get out of a system like this. You can make these kinds of textural pads like this. You can add, so I put in a very basic, super stupid reverb. Sounds particularly bad in this one, but so you can make some really nice textural sounds. You can use it to generate rhythms, to generate it by triggering bangs. You can kind of use it as a nice kind of semi-randomized instantaneous sound generator, and you can cook it up to a MIDI controller or whatever and make it more of an instrument, so that you play with your hands. Play one more, just a random sound we had in the folder. That's a good one. So that's a really quick run through with this patch. It's a patch I've been working on for a while. I used it in my Book of Knowledge and Practical Musical Devices project. I hooked it up to a GPS system so that you were playing a Granular synth patch based on where you were in the world. So all these settings were controlled by GPS data. So you can move through a sound by moving through the world. I started just sticking mics outside of my window and having it run constantly in the background, just kind of fun way of generating nice kind of ambient soundscapes. You can just have it just continuously record and then be playing back while. Is that working? Yeah. So that's just taking the voice of my kind of video outro and using it to generate like a whole set of sounds that you might not have expected. It's good fun, and there are a few different versions of it on my GitHub, including this one. So give it a download and have a play. So I hope that was a good demonstration of what you can do in Pure Data. Definitely let me know if you have any questions, or if you have any suggestions or want to make it better, or anything like that. I think that's everything. Oops, that's the wrong one. Thanks. Yeah, look out for this. I'm going to be doing some more, so I'll be putting. I'm thinking about pointing some microphones from this patch out at some farm animals where I live. I'm just generating some ambient glitchy farm sounds, so if this kind of thing is down your alley, look out for that. Yeah, thanks a bunch. See you soon.